Chapter 5. In Your Dreams. Lydia sighed. It was a figurative sigh, not an actual sigh, she knew. She recognized the surrounding woodland and the smell of the flowers. She knew she was dreaming. Great, I can't even get through the train journey without falling asleep, she grumbled to herself. Why don't those two useless lumps wake me up? She did not relish the idea of having to climb up to the castle and avoid looking into the watcher's eyes. I bet they think I deserve some sleep after all those practice sessions. If only they knew. Sleep isn't restful when I keep ending up here. She looked around her. She did not recognize any specific features, but she knew the types of trees and plants. The hill itself was not always the same shape. There were no recognizable landmarks on the path to the top. Yet she knew where she was. She knew that when she reached the clearing at the top of the hill, the castle would be there. The castle was always the same. She would recognize the stones of its walls and the barren trees which stood inside. The castle was always the same, and the watcher was always there. The watcher's desire was always the same as well. He would want her to look into his eyes to trigger the challenge. The watcher knew she was not ready. It was in his interest to start the challenge before she had a chance to train and organize. Ambrose had suggested that the watcher's people, the Altar-worlders, were not fully prepared. Still, they would want her as unready as possible. Once Lydia looked into the watcher's eyes, the two worlds would open to each other and come into conflict. Lydia felt a start of surprise as she realized she had not dreamed of this place while she had been at the old rectory over Christmas. Their new home really was a sanctuary by night, as much as during the day. She had been busy with the training exercises, some of which she had found had taxed her mind. But at the end of each day, she had hung out with her friends and family. Then she had gone to her room and slept, really slept. Slept through the night with no bad dreams, no challenges. But now she was back here, on the path up to the castle. The sooner she got up there, she decided, the sooner she could refuse to look into the watcher's eyes. Then she would wake up, as she always did at that point. As she climbed the wooded slope, she thought about the watcher and his eyes. She wondered what they were like, what she would see in them. Would they be the sort of eyes anyone else had? What colour would they be? Would they be one flat colour? Or would they have texture, patterns even? Would the pupils be round like a human's, or slits like a cat's? What if they were square, like those of that giant squid? She felt she was looking forward to the time when she would find out. She laughed. "Get out of my head, watcher," she called out loud, though not out loud as she was asleep. "As if I would think like those of that giant squid. She's a friend. Don't suppose you would understand that." Lydia was determined now to get it over with. She would refuse the watcher's demand and wake up. She strode up the hill, wondering why she had to walk at all. At one point, she tried to transport herself to the top. It didn't work. She tried imagining that she was arriving at the top. That didn't work. She realized she would have to walk the full distance as usual. It was not until she arrived at the edge of the clearing that she realized what a nice day it was. The sky was clear and blue, a few fine clouds hovering here and there. Birds were singing, and a warm breeze whispered across the open space. "And what's all this about, watcher?" she called out in her dream. "You ought to listen to birds sometime. They don't all have the same song, and they certainly don't make random noises. They speak to each other. It's mostly hello ladies and get off my land, but it's speaking, communicating. These sound like those antique mechanical toys. Let's get this over, shall we? There's no way I'm looking into your scabby old eyes, not yet, so consider your request refused and let me wake up."
No. There will be no waking.
The voice, which came from close behind her, grated like stone on stone. It was so close it made her shiver. "And why is that, Mr. Watcher?" she asked more confidently than she felt.
Your body cannot wake. My servants have you. You are not on the train,
came his reply. "Well, I'm not going to look into your eyes until I'm ready. And I'm not going to get ready snoozing around here with you. Get your goons to let me go."
No release. No rescue. No end on your challenge.
Whatever. I'm not standing around here listening to you croaking at me all day long. I know where to find you if I change my mind, but we're not hanging out. Bye. Lydia moved away from the castle and its clearing without turning towards the Watcher. She was shaking inside, despite being in a dream, but she refused to show it. She strode away towards the trees. A force tried to hold her back, tugging at every limb and every muscle. It tightened on her. She pushed on ahead until she felt it release, as if a band was snapping. She carried on towards the trees, every step controlled and every pace a victory. It was a minor victory, perhaps, but she had gained some freedom within her imprisonment. As she headed down the slope of the hill, she could see a path between the luscious ferns a short way ahead of her. She took the path, but found it veered to one side across the slope, which didn't feel right. She followed it a little further, but as she had suspected, it turned towards the castle once more. Lydia stepped off the path and carried on down the hill, pushing through the catching bushes and swiping branches. Before she had expected, she reached the edge of the wooded area. She stepped out onto a grassy slope, which led down to a meadow. She sat down on the cool grass, admiring the unfamiliar purple and white flowers which speckled the slope and carpeted the meadow below. The thrill of her victory had faded. The enormity of her situation weighed on her. As she wondered what to do next, she found herself recalling what she had learned from her training with Draco. What did she have in her favour? Her spirits sank as she realized she couldn't think of anything. Her body, wherever it was being kept unconscious. The Death Eaters presumably surrounded it. She knew she was no longer on the Hogwarts Express, but there was no other hint of where she was being held. And how could she tell anyone where she was, even if she knew? She was stuck in this dream world. Even if she could now move around in it, where could she go? She felt hopeless and sick. She felt more tired than she had ever felt. Could she sleep in a dream? Need she sleep if she were already sleeping? Did any of it, anything, matter anymore? The only way out would be to make the wise decision, to issue the challenge by looking into the Grey Watcher's eyes. "Get out of my head, Watcher," she growled. "This is not how I think. I'm not a defeatist, especially when I've just beaten you." Now, what had she learnt from her training which could help her? Examine your assets. What were her assets? She had nothing in this dream world. Nothing was real, and nothing could pass in or out. What about her body? Comatose though it was, it still housed her brain and channeled her magic. They would probably have taken her wand away, but that was unimportant. She could still work magic. Unfortunately, she couldn't see to direct her magic, so she couldn't attack the Death Eaters who had taken her from the train. But could she transport herself somewhere else? There was an idea. The first step in transporting herself, or jaunting as Ambrose had taken to calling it, was to reach out with her mind to her destination. Where should she try to go? Her friends were at Hogwarts, but she didn't want to put them in any danger. The old rectory was her haven, her sanctuary. Ambrose could protect her mum and Fenton from anything, should the enemy follow her. The old rectory it was, and she knew the feel of it so well. But as soon as she tried to reach out, she met a resistance. It was as though someone had draped her mind in heavy bedding. She was unsure whether it was because she was asleep or because there was a layer of magic preventing her. She attempted to push through whatever it was, but had no success. Lydia paused and lay back on the imaginary grass. If it was this hard to just feel something outside the dream, then jaunting out while unconscious was unlikely to work. She needed a different approach. She needed to get a message out. That would probably work best with someone she was close to. Xander came into her mind. They had worked magic together. There was an undeniable bond between them. But what could a cat do, even a magical cat like Xander? Of course, Xander was close to Oddie, and Oddie was exceptionally clever. But what could Xander convey to him without words? She thought about the way Xander and Uncle Ambrose seemed to communicate, when a thought struck her. Ambrose had the power to read minds that were not even trying to communicate. With their closeness, historically and magically, he would be the easiest to get a message to. Buoyed up by the idea, she sat up and focused her mind on the ancient wizard. Pushing a thought out felt, somehow, much sharper than trying to reach out and feel for a destination. The difference was like trying to push a needle through a duvet, rather than trying to push your hand through one. She smiled to herself at the comparison, then concentrated. "Ah, there you are, my dear," came Ambrose's voice. "I have been awaiting your call." His voice was close at hand. She opened her dream eyes. There before her, her uncle sat cross-legged on the grass. "What do you know about this?" she asked, ever suspicious where Ambrose was concerned. "Your friends have informed me that you have disappeared from the Hogwarts Express," he said. "Actually, an informant, one of those set to watch over you, had already let me know. I have determined that it is the Death Eaters, indirectly in league with the Grey Watcher, who have taken you. Your body, so to speak, is being held in a safe house of theirs in Bristol. It is surrounded by a number of powerful layers of magic, designed to present difficulties to those whose magic is like ours, which is to say, the two of us." "But you can still get me out, right?" Lydia asked. "Your friends asked me exactly the same question," he told her. "And what did you tell them?" Lydia was used to Ambrose being annoying, but this was not the time for it. "I shall give you the answer I gave them," Ambrose sighed. "It would be possible for me to rescue you, but I do not intend simply to release you and solve all your problems. I would like you to treat this predicament as a challenge for you to face and to solve." "You're bloody joking," Lydia protested. "Generally," he admitted, "but not so on this occasion." Lydia's mind reeled, and because she was in a dream, her body reeled too. She almost fell over, even though she was sitting on the grass. Ambrose continued in solemn tones. "In the times which shall soon be upon us, upon you, you will face the direst of tests. If you cannot solve your current problem, then those tests will prove unsurmountable. And if you fail, we all fail. The Watcher and his kindred win." "Which is why I mustn't look into his eyes yet," Lydia murmured. Ambrose nodded and gave her a wry smile. "If I need you, will you come back here again?" she asked. There was a pleading tone in her voice which she tried to hold back. He did not smile. "I can come here, into this dream, but I will not advise you, other than to urge you to remember all the things which make you stronger. With that, the old man had gone. Great, a despondent Lydia muttered to herself.